All right, let's dive into Napoleon Bonaparte.
Sounds good.
We've got Wikipedia and Britannica as our guides.
Two perspectives, two different flavors, but ultimately the same story, right?
Oh, you'll see. Buckle up, there are some twists and turns.
I love a good twist.
Yeah.
His story still feels so relevant today, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's all about ambition and power, revolution. Those themes never get old.
Exactly.
So Napoleon, he wasn't actually born French, was he?
Nope, not at all. Napoleon Bonaparte.
Right.
Born in Corsica, 1769.
Corsica, okay.
Just 1 year after, get this, France takes over the island from Genoa.
Wow, so he's Corsican by birth, but French, what, by circumstance?
Yeah, you could say that. I
Yeah.
mean, talk about a complicated relationship with France from the get-go.
Yeah, no kidding. And his family, they were like, what, minor Italian nobility?
Yeah, noble, but not exactly rolling in riches.
I see.
Napoleon, he always gave a lot of credit to his mother, Letizia Ramolino.
His mom.
Yep. For his, discipline, his drive, he actually said, quote, "The future destiny of the child is always the work of the mother."
Wow.
Seems like she was a force to be reckoned with.
She must been. So how does this guy, Corsican, kind of an outsider, end up leading the French armies?
Well, military school, Brienne, then Paris,
Makes sense.
and hold on to your hat, at 16, his dad dies.
Oh, wow.
So he has to become head of the family
Talk about responsibility.
at 16. But anyway, he's brilliant, right?
Yeah.
Math, military strategy.
A natural.
But more than that, his personality, it was shaped by the Enlightenment.
Enlightenment. So reason, logic.
Yeah, pragmatism, not so much the fiery passion of, the French Revolution.
So how did Mr. Enlightenment end up in the middle of a revolution?
It's funny, right? He used those revolutionary ideas when they helped him.
Yeah.
But his own views, much more complex.
I bet.
But a big turning point, 1795, the 13 Vendemiaire uprising.
An uprising.
Royalist rebels trying to overthrow the government. Napoleon, well, he's tasked with defending the Republic.
Oh, so this is where he uses the cannons loaded with grape shot.
A whiff of grape shot, yeah.
Brutal.
Brutal, but effective. It got him the nickname Savior of the Republic.
Savior of the Republic.
Solidified his rep as a man of action.
Yeah.
But I think his motives were, maybe more practical.
Makes sense.
This really shows something about Napoleon. He'd use whatever it took to get what he wanted.
Ambitious, huh?
Extremely. And speaking of ambition, just 2 days after marrying Josephine de Beauharnais.
Josephine, right? That was a whirlwind romance.
Total whirlwind. 2 days later, bam, commander of the Army of Italy.
He never stopped, did he?
Nope. And his speech to the troops before that campaign, it's amazing. He says, "Soldiers, you are naked, ill-fed."
Setting the scene.
Then he says, "In them you will find honor, glory, wealth. Soldiers of Italy, will you be wanting in courage and steadfastness?"
Wow.
He knew how to motivate them.
Promising the spoils of war, right?
Totally. He got them. Italian campaign, it was a masterpiece.
Good masterclass, yeah.
Geography, tactics, his artillery, he was brilliant. Victories against the Austrians, the Sardinians.
So this is where he becomes like a legend, the military genius.
Yeah, pretty much.
So winning battles, power is growing. Was conquering Italy just like step one?
He was already thinking bigger. He started setting up republics in Italy,
Hmm.
loyal to France.
Smart.
Keeping them under control, of course.
Yeah.
He wasn't just about military victories. He had this vision,
A vision.
a new European order, and he was determined to make it happen.
Wow. Speaking of big ambitions, let's get to Egypt. That wasn't just about, conquering territory, was it?
No, way more than that. He took scientists, scholars, 167 of them.
167.
Yeah, he saw it as this scientific and cultural mission, studying the wonders of ancient Egypt.
It's almost like he was an explorer as much as a general.
Right. But it didn't all go to plan.
Of course not.
Taking Malta on the way, that was classic Napoleon.
That's
Fast, decisive, strategically brilliant. But then, the Battle of the Nile.
Oh, right. That was a big one.
Disaster. Admiral Nelson, the British fleet, they crushed the French ships.
How?
Napoleon's army, stranded in Egypt.
And then there's Jaffa.
Jaffa, yeah. A dark chapter.
Definitely.
Plague, supplies running low.
Wow.
Napoleon orders the execution of thousands of Ottoman prisoners.
Thousands.
Yeah. It's controversial, to say the least.
Makes you think about the limits of pragmatism.
Exactly. And the brutality he was capable of.
So, stuck in Egypt, his army's weak, his reputation's taking a hit. What happens next?
Well, while he's gone, France is a mess.
Oh, no.
The directory, the government, it's weak, unpopular. Napoleon sees his chance.
Oh boy, here we go.
He leaves the army in Egypt, heads back to France in 1799.
He was basically a deserter, wasn't he?
Technically, yeah.
Mm.
But the French, they were ready for a hero.
They needed someone.
Exactly. They were done with instability. So Napoleon stages a coup, the coup of 18 Brumaire.
Coup of 18 Brumaire. Okay.
Seizes power. He becomes first consul of France.
Yeah.
End of the French Revolution, beginning of the Napoleonic era.
Wow. From Corsican outsider to the ruler of France. That's quite a journey.
Quite a journey indeed. Napoleon, he didn't waste any time.
What do you mean?
He takes power and boom, reforms everywhere.
Like what?
Centralized government. He appoints these prefects.
Prefects.
Like administrators for each region. They answer directly to him.
Streamlining things.
Exactly. And guess what? That system is still around in France.
Yep.
Talk about a lasting impact.
Wow. Okay. And wasn't there the Napoleonic Code too? That was like a total revamp of French law?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Huge deal. Simplified everything.
How so?
Standardized French law.
Yeah.
Emphasized equality before the law. Protection of property rights.
So before that, it was just like a mess.
Yeah, a patchwork of regional laws. Super confusing. He replaced all that with one unified system.
A modern legal system.
Exactly. And its influence, it spread all over Europe and beyond. Even today, you can see traces of it in legal systems around the world.
So much of what he did is still with us in some way.
It's crazy, right?
It is. And he also reformed education, right? And he created the Banque de France.
He was on a roll.
Yeah.
Education, he saw that as key,
Yeah,
for a strong, prosperous nation.
makes sense.
So he overhauls the whole system, centralizes it, emphasizes science and math.
Oh, interesting.
And the Banque de France, well, that helped stabilize the French economy.
Yeah.
After years of revolutionary turmoil, it needed some stability.
Yeah, no kidding. He was mending fences with the Catholic Church too, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah, the Concordat of 1801.
That seems like a smart move.
Genius, really.
Yeah.
Heal that rift between the state and the church. They'd been at odds since the Revolution.
I can imagine.
So this wins him support from the church, a vast network of influence.
Yeah.
It also projects this image of stability, reconciliation.
Which people wanted.
Totally.
Yeah.
France was tired of chaos. They wanted a leader who could bring them together.
So he's centralizing power, reforming institutions, making peace with the church. He's also a master of propaganda, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He knew the power of image.
Right, like the paintings, the sculptures.
All those grand ceremonies, that lavish coronation.
He wasn't afraid to put on a show.
Not at all. The coronation, that was a spectacle meant to inspire awe.
Yeah.
He even took the crown from the Pope and put it on his own head.
Seriously?
Yeah. It was this powerful statement. He was independent, in control of his own destiny.
Wow. And those iconic images of the bicorn hat, the hand and waistcoat
All
pose.
calculated, carefully crafted to project authority and power.
So why crown himself emperor? Wasn't first consul enough?
I think it was about elevating his status. Domestically, internationally.
He's like a power move.
Totally. He was presenting himself as the heir to the Roman emperors, legitimizing his rule, creating a dynasty.
A dynasty. Wow. Okay, let's talk about the Napoleonic Wars. Those weren't just small battles, right?
They were huge. They engulfed Europe for over a decade.
And the War of the Third Coalition, that was a big one.
Massive. Britain, Russia, Austria, all ganging up on them.
And that led to the Battle of Austerlitz, right?
1805, Austerlitz.
Mm.
Total victory for Napoleon. He completely outmaneuvered his enemies, crushed them.
It's considered one of his greatest victories, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a masterpiece of military strategy.
But those victories, I mean, they came at a cost. So many lives lost, so much suffering.
It was a brutal time, and his continental system, that didn't help.
The continental system, remind me what that was.
His grand plan to cripple Britain's economy,
By doing what?
blocking all trade between Britain and continental Europe.
He was basically trying to control all of Europe's coastlines.
Yeah, pretty much. He thought it would force Britain to make peace on his terms.
It sounds impossible to enforce.
It was. Smuggling was rampant, and the blockade hurt Europe's economies as much as Britain's.
It backfired.
Pretty much. And Britain retaliated with their own blockade. Things escalated quickly.
Okay, then there's the invasion of Russia in 1812.
Oh yeah, that was a disaster.
From what I've read, it was a huge miscalculation.
It was. Napoleon leads his Grande Armée, over 600,000 men,
600,000.
deep into Russia, hoping for a decisive victory. But the Russians, they used scorched earth tactics.
Scorched earth.
Yeah, burning everything as they retreated. So Napoleon's army, they had nothing to eat, nowhere to shelter, plus the brutal Russian winter.
Oh, that's right, the winter.
Devastating. And the Russian resistance, They were relentless.
I can't even imagine trying to supply an army that big in a hostile country.
It was a logistical nightmare. The retreat from Russia was horrific.
How many died?
Thousands upon thousands. Starvation, disease, exposure. Napoleon's reputation, it was shattered.
The invincible general defeated.
Yeah, it was a turning point. His enemies, they saw their chance, formed the Sixth Coalition.
Austria, Prussia, Russia, Britain.
Everyone was against him. He faced defeat after defeat.
And then the Battle of Leipzig.
The Battle of Nations, 1813. Outnumbered, outmaneuvered. It was decisive defeat. Sealed his fate.
This is where he abdicates the first time, right?
Yeah. 1814, he abdicates, exiled to Elba.
A tiny island off the coast of Italy.
From Emperor of France to, well, prisoner on an island. It was a dramatic fall.
You'd think that would be the end.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But Napoleon, he wasn't done yet.
Elba. I mean, how do you come back from that?
Well, he escapes in 1815.
Escapes. Seriously.
Back to France he goes. And get this, the Bourbon monarchy, they'd been restored after his abdication, but they were super unpopular.
Makes sense after Napoleon.
Right. And the French people, even after all the wars, the hardship, they still clung to those revolutionary ideals. They missed the glory days.
And Napoleon was like the symbol of that.
Exactly. So he returns, and it's like a movie. He rallies support, marches on Paris, people flock to his side. The king, he flees.
Just like that.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Napoleon's back in power, no shots fired. That's the 100 days. He tries to rally everyone for one last stand, but his enemies, they're closing in.
And this leads us to Waterloo, one of the most famous battles in history.
Waterloo, 1815. Napoleon versus, well, pretty much everyone. Britain, Prussia. He was outnumbered, outgunned.
A recipe for disaster.
It was brutal. A bloody battle, and in the end, a decisive defeat for Napoleon. No coming back from this one.
This time, exile meant St. Helena.
A remote island in the South Atlantic. That's got to be a blow, right?
From emperor to prisoner.
On a tiny rock, thousands of miles from everything he knew. It's hard to fathom.
So what did he do on St. Helena? Just sit around.
He kept busy, in a way. Dictated his memoirs, read, took walks, tried to settle into a routine, but he was a prisoner, constantly guarded. And his health, well, it was failing.
Makes sense after all that.
He dies in 1821, 51 years old. They still debate what actually killed him. Some think arsenic poisoning, but the evidence is iffy.
Another mystery to add to the Napoleon legend. Okay, so we've talked about the military genius, the politics, the victories, the defeats. But what about the man himself? What do our sources say about his personality?
Complicated. A mix of brilliance and ruthlessness. Driven by ambition and this unshakable belief in his own destiny.
A man of destiny.
Yeah, he could be charming, charismatic, but also, tyrannical, cruel, and deeply superstitious, believed in fate, omens, all that stuff.
And his personal life, that was pretty dramatic too. The marriage to Josephine, the divorce, then marrying Marie-Louise of Austria, all for political reasons.
Everything was about power with him, even his relationships. He needed an heir to secure the dynasty. Josephine couldn't give him one.
So he just, moved on.
Cold, calculated decision, divorce, marry a younger woman, someone who could give him a son. So how do we judge him? Hero or villain? Visionary or dictator?
It's not easy, is it?
Not at all. Napoleon was a product of his time. Embodies both the brilliance and the darkness of that era. His mark on France, on Europe, it's still debated today.
What about his lasting impact? What are some of the things that, are still with us because of him?
His reforms changed France completely. A modern state, centralized, with a legal system, financial institutions, education, all still around today.
And he spread those revolutionary ideas across Europe.
Yeah, even if it was often through force. And his conquests, they actually contributed to the rise of nationalism.
Oh, so?
People in those conquered territories, they resented French domination. It fueled their own sense of national identity. So the guy who wanted to build a French empire actually helped create the conditions for its decline.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it?
It is. But his influence, you can't deny it. His story still fascinates us, inspires us. And that image, the hat, the pose, it's instantly recognizable. He's a legend.
So what can we take away from all this? What does Napoleon's life, his legacy, teach us?
I think it reminds us that power is complex, ambition can be alluring, and myths, they have a way of sticking around. Napoleon's life, he was a roller coaster, triumphs and tragedies all mixed together. And his legacy, well, it's a blend of light and shadow.
It really makes you think.
It does. He did great things and terrible things. It's a warning about unchecked ambition, about the human cost of war. But it also shows how one person can shape history, for good or bad. It raises questions we're still wrestling with.
Like what?
How do we balance the good and the bad, the progress and the destruction? What does greatness even mean? What's the price of
We
ambition?
could talk about this for hours.
We could. But for now, I guess we'll leave it there.
So, what stood out to you most about Napoleon? What questions do you still have? And here's something to ponder. Imagine Napoleon had succeeded, unified Europe under his rule. What would our world look like today? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life and times of Napoleon Bonaparte.